Hi everyone, my name is Mary Liz Bioboa, and once again thank you. Welcome back to Bioboa Uncut. Today I have an amazing guest, but before we do that, for people who are coming here for the first time, thank you so much for clicking. For those who are returning subscribers, thank you so much for coming back, and I hope today you get to enjoy the video that we are about to record. Remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Share with your friends so that we get as many people as possible to be on this channel. I'm trying to get 1,000 subscribers, so your help is highly required. Before we start out on the video, which as of now I don't know what the title of the video would be, but you will know after you meet my next guest. My next guest will introduce herself and will give us a little sneak peek of who they are and what they're all about. Welcome, Arya.
Thank you. So my name is Arya Karijo, and this is clearly uncut. I've been ambushed to be on a video, which is a first.
Because if I asked her earlier, she'd have been, I'm not ready, and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah. So, but let's see, how do I describe myself? I like describing myself based on absolutes. So, and absolutes will be something like, I'm a human being. So that's an absolute, never gonna change. But then sometimes I like describing aspects of that humanity.
Yeah.
But, so for example, I exist as a transgender woman. That's part of my humanity. I love as a lesbian. Yay. Rainbows.
Yes.
And I fight as a feminist, meaning I look at the world through a feminist lens, and I feel that it will be a much more humane place if the world was structured through eyes of especially African and Black feminists. Yeah. So
great.
That's how I describe myself.
That's awesome. So, of course, from that description alone, I think today what we are going to focus on, and of course, Aya can come on this channel many other times to discuss other topics, because in her own right, Aya is an expert in so many other things. But today, that's not the point. But today we're going to speak purely about, we are going to speak a little bit, not a lot, because again, we can't have videos that delve into Aya's life as a trans person, because that would take hours and hours and hours, which we can't pull. But we're just going to speak about, like, generally your experiences as a trans woman, like in bits and pieces. Try and let us in on what has been your journey up to now. Now you can confidently and boldly go out there and say, I'm a trans woman and all that. But it's not something that happened like just like that. It has been a journey. So paint a picture of what that journey has been like for you.
Let me see. Interesting. So I think it's two parts. So there's being a trans woman, which is, there's many trans women in Kenya, across the world, but there's also being a trans woman in your context. So my context is being in Kenya, being this part of Africa. Yeah. But then it has also been a generational context, being a trans woman pre-internet, before there's all this information, and you could find communities by just going on Facebook. And yeah, so I think my experience has been, when I describe it sometimes, it's more of like I've lived several lives in one life. So I know what it is like to be a trans woman pre-internet in Kenya, and then I know what it feels like to be like, in these times we are living in, where there's a community where you can find people online, and where you even have words for it. Because I think for me, there's a whole bunch of 10 years where I knew there was something about me that was different, but I never had the words to say it. I didn't know there was a word like transgender. Yeah. And it took my first internet connection and locking up myself in the room for about a month while saying I was doing online work to research. And even the research came
I'm happy that it's not just me who happened to do something like that.
Yeah, and the research itself started from the point of what is wrong with me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I can laugh about it, but it's sad and it's a bit, well, it's interesting.
It's laughable from an individual perspective, but in reality, with the world we live in, it's really sad, because then it always has to start from you hating yourself first.
Yeah.
To you learning more about yourself, to you then beginning the journey of loving yourself, which is not your average easy journey, essentially. So
yeah, totally. So yeah, that's where my journey began, like trying to find out what is wrong, and then finding a word for that described me. And then there's the excitement of, I found it. It's that kind of almost eureka moment, like I found it, and I'm excited. And then reality checks in, and now you're scared of.
You're scared.
Yeah. Because I think I'll never forget that first day. I like wore a turquoise blouse and some and and a trouser suit and heels, and I went to buy, like, like where they used to have like shops in the estate.
Yeah.
And this was Irish estate. They had like chips and chapatis and so yeah. I went
the one up there.
This was in the lower block. Like
the ones, the H blocks, and
blocks,
the ones that are down there. Okay.
And the day I found the word, like, I'm transgender, so I wore all these clothes which did not belong to me. I don't want to say they belonged to on video, because the person will get pissed. But yeah, I wore this and I went to buy chapati, and inside I was feeling nice. I noticed people like snickering and laughing. Yeah. And then it hit me, okay, I found it. I found the thing I was looking for. And there's a part of me that's excited at this finding. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that this finding is like widely accepted and everybody is as excited as I am. And so after that, now there was panic. There was more, how do I fix this, or how do I hide it? Yeah. And that was the story for a bunch of years before I finally found, a community. And yeah, that was also a process. So there's two things. I'm glad it's different for like younger queer people. They figure themselves out as early as high school, second year of high school.
And in that gladness, you should also remember to just like, and I feel like we don't speak about this more often, to just pat yourself in the shoulder, because to many it might just be Arya who is on social media and just living through their life and everything. But I think your presence there is a lot of things for many people. I think, and I know many queer people, comment down below if you think this is true, many queer people lack stories that they resonate with. If right now I go online, chances of me interacting with a lot of queer stories about white people are very high. And while, yes, those are stories about queer people, and yay, for the better part, what I want is those affirming stories, but of Black African queer people. And by African, I mean African, not Black American. I mean African people in the African continent, sharing their experiences. And most of the time we don't have that. Most of the time, and that's why for you one moment you realize, oh, I can do all this, and then you dress up and you go out, and then you realize, oh shit, I'm actually outside to a world that is not necessarily accepting. And it takes a while before you realize that, because then the way our minds are built, you're supposed, you would think as soon as you're comfortable with yourself, the world will just be okay and everything. But when it comes to queerness, the narrative changes completely, right? Like, you have to actually be answerable. That's where like concepts like coming out and everything are born from, because you kind of have to explain yourself, which is really ridiculous. So like, just recognizing, like, the younger ones are having an easier time now because the older ones dared and had audacity to just be able to say, like, beyond, even fighting for rights and everything, just to be able to live authentically as ourselves. And you have been doing that for a while now, and that counts for something. To many people it might not, to big institutions and all that kind of stuff it might not, but to individual it does, because then there's someone who solely followed you because of the way you exist on social media, for example, and that is something for them. So like, I think that is one of the things you should not forget to pat yourself on the shoulder while you're saying you're happy for younger people. Place yourself at a place where you're glad you contributed to how younger people look at everything now.
I will.
Yes, you have to remember that, because I feel like most of the time we kind of get lost in the bigger dream of what we are fighting for. We forget the small ways in which we contribute to it. Sometimes it's just how we live, and that is the most important thing. And regardless of how much changes, I mean, South Africa is one of the countries that can give us an example. South Africa has been one of the most progressive countries in Africa, but until today, the rates of homophobia are higher in South Africa. Killings from homophobia are higher, killings from transphobia are higher. So we need to recognize how systems changing is not the society changing. And sometimes society changing requires people like you who are open enough and bold enough and, you know, just honest enough to be able to say, you know, it's beyond the systems. How do I live, and how do I make how I live my life become impactful to other people who are like me, to be able to live their lives like that. So that is very, very important. And thank you so much for doing that all the time. Like, it's what counts, really, in the grand scheme of things. That's what counts the most. So then my next question would probably be, as a person who lives, of course, on social media, you live your life out as a trans person, and in your day-to-day life, you know, you work in spaces, and one of the things you have to constantly remember is to bring your transness into the room and all that. How has that been like for you?
Well, maybe I'll pick it up from what you said, like just existing as me, like out there. I think this would not have happened if I'd not met, community. And the first person I met was Audrey, 16. And then I was still scared. I was still trying to figure out these things. But she was out there on TV, in court, and then. But up to then, I thought it was just Audrey and me. I didn't know there was a whole community. So 2019, meeting this whole community of trans people, intersex people, and also non-binary folks. I think that just opened the world for me. Plus, also I was aging. I was turning, 38, I guess.
That isn't 20?
19.
You're turning 38.
I'm pretty old, yes.
I'm trying to think. I know that information. They don't know that information, so yes, 38.
So it was that point in life where you're like, okay, it's this one life. There's no, there's no second life where I get to go, live my trans reality. It has to be this life. And so at that point I was like, let's just live life. Let me be me. Let me give this. Because the thing is, once you're struggling to be what society wants you to be like, or once you're trying to hide the real you from society, you're also fighting yourself. So at that point it's like, let me just set myself free. Let me see.
Let me stop fighting myself.
Person be.
Like for myself, let me not fight myself anymore. We'll fight the system, but myself, I'm not fighting myself anymore. I'm being.
So there was that, and then I think once the mind changes and once you have a community in place, then you start finding out things like, the basics of how you can. So at that point, you've decided to live in society as yourself. So whether it's in school, at work, in your microspace, like going to work, going to the shop, you're living as that human being who also exists as a transgender person. So that's the first one. But then this person is at odds first with the legal system because the documents don't reflect you. And then you're also at odds with your body. So there's the thing you exactly know you are, but then you also struggle with your own body, partly because of the stereotypes of the binary that society has, that amplifies the struggle. But yeah, also as even in a vacuum, just as yourself, there's also the parts you struggle with, and you're like, okay, this doesn't really feel like me. This body does not match up with my being and with my spirit. So yeah, those are the biggest struggles. And then now, wait, what was the question? I feel like, did I drink too much?
No, you didn't. No, you didn't. No, but you're doing okay, pretty much. Like, the question was, you live out there, you're online and everything. What does that life look like for you in terms of like everywhere you go, spaces you occupy and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So, okay, I mentioned the social bit where you know, in the house you lease or in the shop you go to buy groceries, you're just yourself, and so there's you being you, and then there's how people react to you. So there's, and this is a lot in our society in Kenya, there's a huge group of people who react like you are an affront to their life, to their way of life, like your own existence challenges, like what they believe to be their life. And that's a group I've never understood, probably never will.
You never will. I mean, and probably while you're speaking about that, talk a little bit about, I mean, we were experiencing all of this together in 2020 when we went through a huge series of just being evicted from one place to another. And you can put that in so that, like, you know, to create perspective, because I feel like most of the time as queer people, when you're speaking about our experiences, people would quickly jump to, but you cannot force people to host you if they don't want to do that and all that kind of stuff. And people don't see the bigger perspective of it, where you're just a human being. It's not like you went and you said you're gay. In fact, it's the last thing you wanted to say. You just wanted to exist. You just wanted to do your shit the way you wanted to do your shit. But you realize people actually cloak you, people profile you, people judge you, and because of all that, they feel entitled to oppress you in one way or the other. So speak about that as well while you're...
Yeah. So, I mean, so yeah, there's this whole group of people who behave like you being in existence threatens their life.
Yeah.
And I don't know, they almost give you like mystical powers. Like if you walk through here, their children will become transgender, or they'll become lesbians.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's powers we do not have. I mean,
I wish we had those powers though. I wish we had those powers, because
the world rainbow.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the whole concept of, if you're gonna accuse me of something, I could as well be it then, you know. I wish we could do that, but we can't do that. It's the same way people think it's a choice to be who we are. And I'm like, I wish it was a choice, because if it was a choice, some of the experiences I had when I was younger, I wouldn't have had those experiences, because I would have made a better choice. But it's not a choice. It's never about a choice. So, like, so crazy.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, there's this whole group that are just threatened by presence and existence. And I mean, you've mentioned 2020, and so the whole thing, I mean, so 2020 was interesting because everything people say, you know, people are like, oh, you know, just go live your lives in your houses. Do not like you know, don't bring your lives out to us. Do not tell us what you're doing in the bedroom. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're
just living our lives, not telling you what we do in our bedrooms, just minding our business.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, we've paid rent, and we're like, okay, we don't want to bother people like with our existence, so let's pick a high-end area of town, struggle with the rent, and you know, just not get into anyone's space, have our own balcony with, you know, like our rainbow flag,
do whatever it is we want with our space, because after all we are paying rent for it, you know.
And you know, surprising thing, with all that effort, with all the amounts of money we're paying to be in that space, with all our attempts at, you know, privacy and just to be in our own space, you know, just live our lives, people still found a way to come in. There was the neighbor who took a photo of our door and sent it out shared it in our WhatsApp group, which they refused to add us.
Even when we were just covering a pupil that was damaged and we didn't want people to be, literally.
Yeah. So, yeah. So it was the opposite. It was not us putting out our, sex lives or our agenda out there.
Yeah.
It was people who came looking for us. They're like, oh, the guys in Britain, they're going to teach our children lesbianism. Like, first, we don't even know if you have children. We've been in the neighborhood for less than a month, few weeks.
It wasn't late. It was the
week
first day.
Week
the first day we arrived, the drama started. It wasn't even up to a week. It was just the first day.
Yeah.
Drama started the first. Like you arrive, because I remember we moved pretty. Okay, it wasn't pretty early, but we moved and we finished moving moving things like around 6:30 there in the evening.
And the next day is when the texts start coming.
Yes.
Do you work for this LGBT organization?
And you're like, what do you do? We don't mention an organization that we don't even work for. And just so we're clear, the organization they mentioned was Outright, right?
Yeah.
I think they just went online and Googled and Outright came up and they were like, do you work for Outright? And it was so crazy. Even now going back in time and I'm like, this was actually a very crazy thing. We didn't know anyone. We were still, trying to get acquainted with everything that was happening. We were being told there's a group we'll be added to. We ended up not being added in the group because, why would you add lesbians and gays and transgender people in the group? Because they'll teach your kids how to be things you don't expect them to be and all that. But it was such a crazy experience. And even moving forward from that, we've been evicted, but we have to stay a month because we have to figure out moving again and all that. And even looking for places, the experiences were horrendous.
Yeah, first, that was exactly what you're saying, being told, oh no, you can't join this WhatsApp group, even if we're discussing about you.
Yeah.
So, really, society says we do all these things, but it's quite the opposite. It's society that is discriminating. It's society that's reaching into our bedrooms and asking, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And it's society painting us with all these big powers of changing other people's gender and sexuality that we don't have.
Yeah.
And then when they come up with that, they start treating us like we're contagious. And we found that when we started looking for ours, and does the agent first. We reach out and they're like, okay, the landlord is good. Like, okay,
everything has been verified.
Yeah.
And now we are going to do the inventory, because I remember it's the day for inventory that, of course, we had to meet these people in person and all that, and the agent was there, and we did the inventory nicely. Of course, I noticed he was being shady, but I was like, if you're not going to say anything, you're just going to do things. Then after we are done and everything is done, we are waiting for the final information to know where to do the deposits and everything. That's when
so this guy, that's the other thing. If you're transgender, this is the thing. You can live socially out there as much as true to yourself.
Yeah.
But if your legal documentation does not match up, people will always find another way to discriminate against you.
Yeah.
And so with this particular house, the owner of the house was like, oh yeah, it's okay, please go do inventory with my agent. And the first thing the agent says is like, why is your passport and your national ID different? And so I told him, I was like, these are all my documents.
Yeah.
Which name do you want to use?
Yeah.
And be like, send me the ID. And we send the ID. And then now the day we're doing the inventory, then we're all there and they sing all this
obviously queer people, non-binary people.
Yeah, different people.
Yeah.
Like everything society has told him we should be. And then he's looking at the idea I sent him and he's looking at me and he's like, and he sits at the corner. And so after that, after the whole episode, he ghosted us for 2 days. And we're that deadline coming up, we need to move out. And this is the house we're supposed to move into, but the agent has gone
MIA on us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so when he reached out later, he's like, oh, there was someone else. I'm like, we spent a whole afternoon with you. Why didn't you mention there's
we
someone
did an
else?
inventory. Were we doing an inventory
Exactly.
and there was another person who did the
I
same
was
thing?
like,
Should
oh
have
no,
let us know.
the person came up today morning. And I'm like, okay, if the person came up today morning, then my
We
point...
are the ones who have the right to the
Exactly.
house
My
because
point
we've
is
been there
exactly,
earlier. Yeah.
you locked us out because of some prejudice you have.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, he kept saying, no, it's not like that. But clearly, that's what he did. He looked at us and he was like, these guys are different. And, you know, the way people feel that if you play by the rules of society, if you minimize yourself, then you're going to become acceptable.
Yeah.
That's not the case. I mean, we're paying a ton of money for that house.
Yeah, we were actually looking for ways in which we can reduce the proximity we have to abuse on queer people. And it seemed as though the more money we paid, the closer we were getting to abuse.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's crazy.
Exactly. So yeah, like money is not going to protect us from being discriminated or from abuse. Like if someone's gonna do it,
they will do it. In fact, they'll use their money and position to actually oppress you further. So
yeah,
so crazy.
So yeah, that's again, and there's nice people out there. The final house we found, the guy took a look at us and he changed the whole contract.
He allowed us to change the contract and include words and statements that are inclusive, that would ensure in future, whether he's there or not, regardless of who is in office, we can actually provide our contract and be able to say, our contract reads like this and this is what we are following and all that. And I think the problem with everything is the fact that 9 out of 10 people are homophobic, transphobic, biphobic, queerphobic in general. And then the one person who you can never really tell where you'll find that one person is the person who is nice. And the one person who is being nice out of the 10 people can't provide safe residential areas for all queer people. Yeah. Because queer people are many. And I want people to refrain from this whole conversation of, the queer community is small, we don't have so many people. No. We have so many people in a community that doesn't make it safe for them to speak about their queerness. So many people are having to compromise about speaking about their queerness so that they can have a semblance of what a normal life looks like. They can just continue with their lives without having to because in reality we don't have to explain anything, except for us people who are out, when someone asks, are you queer, you don't hide it, you answer yes. And that's the difference. And immediately you answer that, operation begins. Or for us who are out, we don't walk around trying to hide who we are. We don't walk around trying to hide our identity. We don't walk around trying to pretend we are one thing, yet we are not. And most of the time, it's not necessarily pretending. People have to hide that part of them because that is their way of survival. And so for us, because we don't have to hide that, people cloak us, and being cloaked is a cool thing because it means someone can see through your queerness from afar, right? But the downside of it is, as soon as you're cloaked, if a person is a bad person, then you experience all the badness they come with. And most of the time, it's bad people who cloak you, so there's that. So it's so crazy. I think there's a long way we have to go with everything.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like you said, so it's either two things. People either make you out as this dangerous person who's going to change their children into well, in our terms, it's into something beautiful. But yeah, in their terms,
to them it's evil,
into something
and
evil.
Yeah.
So there's that group. And then there's another group, especially if you're a person who's not conforming to gender, they attempt to turn into a joke. So you have the people who sit on the side of the road and try to,
make a mockery out of
your identity and all those. Yeah. And it's two sides of one coin. It's that whole, like said, homophobia and transphobia. And in one way, it's manifesting as people try to make your identity and your life a joke. Yeah. Which is basically erasure. Yeah. And then people try to make your identity and your life into something that's dangerous and that should not be, let to exist. And funny thing is, these people exist at every level. It's at, it's family, it's the neighborhood. Yeah. And at state level, they say things like, oh, this group of people are trying to destroy families.
And isn't it crazy? I think I just had like a moment, like an epiphany right now. Isn't it crazy that they make us out to be, evil people, dangerous people, but we are the ones who die in their hands?
Exactly.
Because hardly would you hear the reverse of the story. Hardly would you hear a queer person who killed someone who was attacking them. Most of the time we are so vulnerable that we don't even get an opportunity to defend ourselves. All we have to do is die in the process of just existing as ourselves. And it's crazy because then to the rest of the world we are portrayed as the dangerous ones.
I mean that's the excuse. If you portray someone as a dangerous, powerful person who can change,
like
someone else,
you're like creating a what do we call it?
You create this villain who, then you have an excuse as a mob.
Justification for as to why it's okay to kill them.
So if you're a mob and you're beating up this dangerous queer person, then you're justified because you just saved all the neighborhood children from becoming lesbians, or from the agenda going from whatever cisgender person they were into, transgender and binary. And so you as a mob are justified because you've painted this person as dangerous. If you painted them as, somebody to laugh at, then it means you don't have to take them seriously if they're looking for a job, if they're qualified, if anything that is their talent as, their talent and their skills as a human being, you can minimize it because you've made them into a joke. And society will use this from like the very lower level to all the way up. I mean, on the one hand, we have representatives who are like, oh, these people are dangerous to the family. So that's the group that's portraying us as the dangerous bit. Then on the other side, you have the president who's saying, oh, these people are not an issue. So
which means we are not hurting anyone, we are not doing anything.
Yeah, so
we don't matter that much. Exactly. We are not important, so leave them alone. Like it's so crazy.
Yeah, it's both sides of one coin. So aim is on the group that will laugh at you and minimize you and be like, you should only be found in comedies and
things that are not serious.
Yeah.
And when it comes to things that are serious, like systemic oppression and all that kind of stuff, they go ahead and actually criminalize you. Exactly. It's so crazy. It's so crazy to think about. I think the other question I want to ask is, as a trans person, and I feel like globally this is one of the biggest conversations that, always end up in some serious back and forth. Especially as trans people, in the LGBTQ movement in general, there tends to be this kind of division that crops up in terms of, advocacy and, just work to do with human rights and trans people. There's always this gap people have created that, trans people work on their issues on their own, and then like any other letters minus the T, like on another group. And then even when you come to the other groups, like they still levels of division, but we won't delve into that as much today. We'll just speak about like the trans movement and the LGBTQ general movement altogether. What is your take on that, and how, like, somehow for some interesting reason, and this is purely on, people in the community per se, like just like having this kind of division where we for me, I feel like mostly it's not seeing how our issues intersect, and so these rifts are created because people feel like, our issues don't represent us and your issues don't represent us, but in reality we are all fighting for our lives. We are fighting against the same system that invalidates our existence as human beings. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, the first place intersectionality begins is within the person.
Yes.
So like you have a bunch of identities. There's an identity that explains your gender, there's an identity that explains your sexuality, there's an identity that explains your sex. And all these three things are not dependent on each other. So your sex then determine your gender, it then determine your sexuality, but they're all interconnected because they're found in one person.
Yeah, they're all things that define who I am.
They're part of your being a human being.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, because on the one hand, there's society which tends to tell us there's a certain way of being, and by being in this way, by being transgender or by being lesbian, you're in opposition to this way of being. And so what happens as oppressed groups, people try to find proximity to everything they were told was the correct way of being. So if you're a lesbian and you can side and say, oh, you know, I'm the man in the relationship, which is very weird. Like, you're a man who is in a relationship of 2+ women. Yeah. But because you're trying to have proximity to an heteronormative relationship, you create that posture of a man in a relationship. Yeah. Same if you're transgender. I mean, back in the day, in the 80s or wherever, the way people used to explain trans people, they would say, oh, you know, I'm a woman in a man's body. And so it was more of an appeal to pity. And that's how, and I mean, we don't blame people, whatever science was there at the time and whatever kind of societies they are trying to navigate. This is the tool they had.
It took them going through that for us to understand why we need to be, you know, whatever it is we are aspiring to be.
They needed that to survive. Yeah. But if you look at it again, they are appealing to proximity. They are appealing to the binary. They are saying, you know, we are not an altogether different category of gender, which is what transgender people are. So, like, if we're doing categories of gender, you'll have, you know, cisgender people, you'll have transgender people, and then you'd have like non-binary folks. 3 whole separate categories of gender. But instead of saying, you know, I'm a real transgender woman, it's safer for me if I said I'm a real woman, meaning I'm a real cisgender woman. So again, looking for proximity to the binary and to something close, which again comes to when we are agitating for, you know, better lives, like legal acceptance. And so each of the groups under this whole LGBTIQ umbrella sometimes find it convenient to throw other groups under the bus.
Which is so crazy.
Yeah, in order to achieve some milestone for the individual group, which is sad because eventually, if something bad is happening to another group within this whole
thing is, they'll finish with all the other groups, then you'll be the only one left, and then they'll have no people that will come for you.
Come back after. So in Kenya, we had the big thing about you know, intersex people being included. Yeah. And that was nice. I mean, it was nice finally the government saying, you know, let's enumerate intersex people, let's find out how many they are. Yeah. But then some human rights activists, not necessarily intersex people, but some human rights activists started saying, oh, you know, intersex is by birth, transgender is by choice. So kind of implying that being transgender is a sort of a behavior, like you put on makeup and you're just choosing to play a gender role. And this is the narrative. They're like, oh, this is biology and this is not biology. It's a choice. It's a behavior that you can change day in, day out. And while that kind of furthered the whole conversation on getting intersex people enumerated in the census, the fact is it comes back to all of us, to intersex people and to transgender people, when it comes to getting identification documents. Because the government is not going to question you as an intersex person. They'll question all of us as people they don't accept.
Yes, we are all in the group of people they don't accept.
And so, just fighting at odds and saying, you know, we're different, we're close to what is accepted by society, or our biology is, or appealing to pity. You know, our biology is wrong. There's no wrong biology. There's 46 groups of intersex people, and they're
It's actually 52 thereabout.
52?
Yeah.
And they are there.
And some of them are about, like, of course, the physical sex organs that people have, and then for the better part, most of them are chromosomal. And I think we don't have conversations enough about the bodies of people, hormones, and all that kind of stuff, and how people vary from one person to another just because of, you know, the kind of chromosomes they have within their bodies and all that kind of stuff.
So instead of arguing a valid biological truth and saying, you know, intersex people are valid, we exist because of, you know, chromosomes, we exist because of all these other different variations, all these 46, 52 plus variations of sex. Instead of saying each of these variations are as valid as being male or female, the temptation is to appeal to pity and say, oh, you know, it's our biology that can be fixed, so that we can fit into the male and female thing. And that appeal to pity winds up leading to further problems along the line. And for trans people, they can also, there's a section that always appealed, you know, to this pity by society by saying, oh, you know, we are not like LGBT people, we're not like lesbians, gay and bisexual people. Ours is a gender thing. We are not out there having sex. So
as if having sex is wrong. Come on, people. Can we just all agree, in the very least, and this is me recognizing that we have asexual people, but in the very least, we are all products of sex, right? We were born out of sex. So can we just agree from the virtue of how we came to be, we are all sexual beings, and we can all at least respect that and not try and make it look like, you know, it's a bad thing to actually have sex. It's not a bad thing to have sex. It's a bad thing to have sex in a place where you're told not to have sex, for example. It's a bad thing to have sex in public because constitutionally we know that is wrong. That is indecent exposure. It's a bad thing to have sex with minors because we do agree if you're below 18, you don't consent to sex. So someone who has sex with you is someone who is actually defiling you, is a pedophile and all that kind of stuff. But we can't criticize adults who are above the age of 18 consenting to sex, regardless of how much they're having it, where they're having, regardless of whether their sexuality is founded on the grounds of them wanting to have sex. It can't possibly be a problem because then they're just being human.
That's the challenge with appealing to pity and appealing to trying to fit in. So by trying to fit in, I mean a lot of trans people stayed out of the whole repeal 162 process because they're like, you know,
you were with me when we had those things that we had, but go on.
Exactly. So people are like, okay, I don't need to show up for that because this law is about gay men. It's gay men's ass is on the line. It doesn't mention lesbians, they mention transgender people. My issue is gender, it's not sexuality. So I should not be seen anywhere near that court. But the thing is, I mean, while those arguments can fly and while they might get us past some doors, eventually when the barriers start coming down, they just close out the same people you threw under the bus and you're all on the one side. When I walk on the streets, when people are insults at me, they don't say, oh, you transgender person. A lot of general, I mean, everyday Kenyans don't know the word transgender. So they just assume, depending on where they see it, someone will say, oh, that gay man. Someone else will look and be, these lesbian women looking like men. So in society, everyday society, the discrimination and stigma we face is based on, you know, the sexuality. So it pays. It pays when there's a fight for having a law that discriminates based on sexuality. It pays for all of us to fight that discriminative law because out here in society we'll be discriminated. No one will take time to sit down and be like, oh, so
and literally try to narrow down on how you identify and all that.
And then say, oh, no, you won't discriminate you, are fine, you're a gender person. Not they will discriminate and they'll discriminate you based on...
And Kenyans are not that informed to know just because you say being transgender is a gender thing and not a sexuality thing. There's no Kenyan who is trying to, you know, read up and refine the information about trans people like that. So there's no one who will afford you that anywhere on the streets. People just generalize gay, lesbians, bisexual, and all that. And when it comes down to the wire, when we have laws being passed or laws being denied, regardless of where you're placed as a group of people, they still get to affect you. Because then intersex people are protected, but to what magnitude? Recently we did a protest about the reproductive health policy, and best believe intersex people were only mentioned on the glossary.
Exactly.
Throughout the document, they're not mentioned anywhere. And you are here thinking, they're recognized by the government, but are they really? The truth of the matter is that they're not.
Yes, that's the sad bit. But anyone who believes that by, having a campaign for rights that excludes other identities is winning.
Yeah,
it's a sad way of looking at things, and it always winds up with all, like, no one differentiates the groups that are actively opposing, and by actively opposing I mean fundraising, running campaigns. Like, we had Citizen Go doing a whole campaign on Twitter just to put down a reproductive health bill. These groups don't discriminate, and so today will be nice to trans people. And these are our intersex people. We love them. Kenya Catholic Doctors Association, Kenya Christian Doctors Association led a whole petition against intersex people.
Right.
So the groups that are anti-gender and anti-rights do not discriminate us and say, oh, today we are nice to LGBT people or LBQ women, and okay, with gay men we don't want you to date. They don't discriminate, so it doesn't pay for people within these communities first to think by throwing another community under the bus helps advance their rights. Two, to think that they're going to receive any special treatment. So appealing to pity doesn't work.
In fact, we are here because we are okay with throwing each other under the bus. It's a more divide and conquer kind of rule. The more they divide us, the more they conquer. The more we don't get to progress in terms of achieving rights for LGBTQ plus persons.
It's the other thing that really divides this whole rainbow family is money. So
Solo is the money. I don't want us to speak about that in this episode because I'm hoping we'll have another episode again. And I want everyone to comment if you'd want to see an episode where we break down the human rights movement, funding and all that, and how that pits LGBTQ people against each other. That's one. But also two, I would like for you to comment with some other things you'd want Aya to be part of. Do you want Aya to be part of the Truth or Drink series? If so, please let us know. Lahum tume pesa za wine ya Aya. Aya atakunywa shots za wine. But now, as we are closing up on the video, I think one, to younger self, and two, to younger trans people. What would you say to your younger self, and what would you say to younger trans people now?
I think to younger self will be like, look at us now.
Look at us now.
Yeah, right? Because I mean, I don't think I will ever have imagined, but yeah, with all the challenges, I mean, we speak about, and I mean, it's easy like to really focus on them because they are so pervasive and in our face every waking day. But still, there's that joy, and will I call it joy? There's union with yourself. Now, the minute you start living your truth about your gender or your sexuality, I don't think there's any other feeling that beats that.
All the turmoil is external, but internally you are at peace with yourself. And I think people underestimate the power of that. You could be lonely and sad because of how externally things are, but when you come back to yourself, it's the most peaceful, beautiful place to come back to.
And I mean, I wish it would be easier for people to navigate this, but well, it's what it is for everyone. But once you get through that part where you figured out, your gender, your sexuality, and you're okay with it. You're not trying to change it for anyone. That's a really beautiful place to be in life. And yeah, I don't think I'll give that up for anything. So yes, to my younger self, it will be like, look at us now.
Yay. And to younger transgender people.
It's almost the same. I mean, I will tell them just to live their truth. I think it's beautiful that they're really finding themselves at an early age. They're living the authentic self. Their politics are beautiful. I think I love Gen Z, not just trans people. I love
Gen Z are beautiful people, yes. Aren't they?
Totally. They are just, yes, we love you.
We love Gen Zs. In this household and everyone who comes here, we love Gen Zs because Gen Zs, my goodness, I think since the beginning of this year, through and through, I've been reminded of how awesome Gen Zs are and how I remember last year we were having a conversation on Facebook with a lady called Deborah. Right now she's on a Facebook break. She always takes break early in the year to work, and then later in the year she comes back to just have fun and all that kind of stuff. And we were talking about, a revolution and how it's clear Gen Zs, if them is going to be a revolution, Gen Zs are the ones to lead the revolution. And the reason millennials can't is because millennials are more for personal politics. It's more, which car am I driving, what job am I doing, how am I making it in life and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to what cars are we driving, what jobs are we doing, are we happy, instead of making it a collective and seeing how if we succeed as a collective we cushion ourselves better as opposed to if it's an individual. And Gen Zs care for each other. Gen Zs look at everything and think, not only do I want to change for myself, I want to change for all of us. Because I also don't want to be the one who has succeeded and then everyone relies on me. And I think that makes, that fact alone makes Gen Zs the most beautiful people, because you listen to them talk and you're like, oh my goodness, I wish I could go back and be born a Gen Z, but I can't go back. But yeah, Gen Zs, keep doing what you're doing. I am a Gen Z millennial. I'm happy to interact with Gen Zs, and I'm happy to, to work with Gen Zs. I'm happy to see the world from the lens of a Gen Z, because it's the world I've always envisioned, the world of all of us, not just myself.
Totally. Yeah, and for them, for young trans people, I just like to say, keep being you. Do you. Like, live that authentic self. Ask the world to shape itself in your lens. Right. Don't do it the other way around. Don't try to fit into the world and into these weird systems. Take apart the systems until we can all live in a more humane and
accepting and respectful, and a world that is safe for all of us, right? Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I'm depending on these people to bring you back. They always do. So remember to comment, like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe, because if many of you subscribe, it means many of you want Aya to come back, and then Aya will come back, and then we will speak about the spaces, the human rights spaces, and what they look like for queer people, what causes the rifts that we have within the queer community, and moving forward, try to paint a picture of what the future looks like if we changed certain things and all that kind of stuff. But thank you so much for coming and stopping by, and we love you.
Ambushed.
I love you. You'll always be ambushed. You have to always remember that. Here's the thing. If I tell these people, you're coming to my channel on the 5th of May, 2022. 5th of May, I might call them and they'll not be available and ready, because they're thinking about it and they're shying off. But when you ambush them like this, you see how Aya has been awesome in the beginning. I'm sure you enjoyed the video, because if you're here now, you've definitely enjoyed the video, and I'm so glad that you've stayed up to the end of the video. So again, like, comment, share, and subscribe. I will leave Aya's social media site so that you can follow her if you're interested to follow her on social media. also follow me. Will I leave my site there? I think so, maybe. But for easier access, Merili is everywhere, on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. I think I've also changed my name recently, yes. So just find me. Merili is everywhere. You'll be able to find me and interact with my content there. And yep, thank you so much for joining, and I will see you guys in the next video.